Imagine you're lying on an operating table, about to undergo a critical heart surgery. You have two choices for your lead surgeon. Dr. A. He's been practicing for 30 years. He's the head of the department, he has gray hair, and he's done this procedure thousands of times. Dr. B. She's only been out of med school for 5 years. She's younger, less famous, and has done a fraction of the surgeries Dr. A has. Instinctively, who do you choose? Most of us, if we want to stay alive, pick Dr. A. We trust experience. We believe that time on the job equals skill. But medical research has revealed a terrifying truth. In many cases, you would have made the wrong choice. Studies show that a doctor's skill often peaks after about 5 to 10 years of practice, and then it plateaus. Or worse, it starts to decline. The doctor with 30 years of experience can actually be less accurate than the one with 5. Why does this make no sense? Why do we drive every single day for 20 years but never become Formula 1 racers? Why do we type for 8 hours a day but our typing speed never increases after our first year on the job? The answer lies in a lie we've been told since we were children. Practice makes perfect. This is a dangerous lie. Practice does not make perfect. Practice only makes permanent. If you repeat a wrong action, or if you repeat an action at a mediocre level, you are not improving. You are just cementing your mediocrity, turning it into a rigid habit that is impossible to break. Most people don't actually have 10 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. You might be a victim of the illusion of competence. You think you're working hard. You think you're grinding. But in reality, your brain is on autopilot. You are stuck. In this video, we aren't going to talk about cliché advice like just try harder. We are going to dissect the actual science of mastery. We're going deep into the brain to see what truly separates a genius from an average person. And I'm going to give you a specific blueprint to shatter your own limits. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. To understand why we fail to become excellent, first you have to understand the machine driving your behavior, the brain. Evolutionarily speaking, your brain wasn't designed to help you become a concert pianist or a brilliant CEO. It was designed for one ultimate purpose: to keep you alive. And to stay alive, the brain follows a core biological principle called homeostasis. It always seeks stability and, most importantly, energy conservation. Any activity that burns too much energy and focus is viewed by the brain as a threat. This is where we meet our true enemy. Psychologists call it the OK plateau. Let me explain how it works using an example we've all been through: learning to drive or learning to type. According to the Fitz and Posner model, when you learn any new skill, you go through 3 phases. Phase 1, the cognitive phase. Think back to the first time you sat behind the wheel. Everything was incredibly stressful. You had to think about every tiny movement: the gas pedal, the brake, the rearview mirror, the road signs. You couldn't hold a conversation. You probably even turned down the radio to see better. At this point, your brain is firing on all cylinders. You are learning and you are improving fast. Phase 2, the associative phase. You start making fewer mistakes. The movements become smoother. You don't have to look down at the pedals to know where they are anymore. And then you slip into phase 3, the autonomous phase. This is when you drive home from work, pull into your driveway, and suddenly realize you don't remember a single thing about the drive. You were driving completely unconsciously. You could drive, listen to music, and think about dinner all at the same time. You reached the OK plateau. You became good enough not to crash. You became OK. And the very second you hit OK, a tragedy occurs. Learning stops. The brain says, "Great, this skill is installed," switching to autopilot to save battery. This is the trap. We confuse the comfort of the autonomous phase with mastery. We think that because we drive every day,
we are practicing. No, you are not practicing. You are just using a frozen skill. Look at office typists. If you measure their typing speed, you'll see a strange graph. They improve rapidly in their first year, hitting about 40 to 50 words per minute, and then the line goes flat. Even if they work for another 10 or 20 years, that speed stays exactly the same. Why? Because they reached a level that was good enough not to get fired, and their brain immediately stopped trying. They are just repeating the same level of performance day in and day out. The brutal truth is this: when something becomes easy, pleasant, and comfortable, that is a sure sign that you are no longer improving. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. So how do we break this powerful biological mechanism? How do we force the brain to kick off autopilot and keep climbing the hill? We need a special kind of fuel science calls deliberate practice. And it starts with understanding what is actually happening deep inside your nervous system.
So, if repeating the same thing over and over doesn't make us better, what does? Anders Ericsson, the world's leading researcher on peak performance, spent his entire life answering this question. He discovered that not all practice is created equal. There is a clear hierarchy of practice. At the bottom of the pyramid is what we just talked about: naive practice. That's when you play a song, hit a wrong note, and start over hoping you'll get it right next time. That is prayer, not practice. One step up is purposeful practice. You have a clear goal, like playing the chorus correctly. You focus and you try hard. This is better, but still not enough to get you to the top. The peak of the pyramid is deliberate practice. This is the gold standard. Where's the difference? It lies in what happens inside your skull. Let's talk about myelin. Imagine your brain is like a giant bundle of electrical wires. Every time you perform an action, like swinging a golf club, your brain sends an electrical signal down a chain of nerve fibers to your muscles. In a beginner, this signal is like walking on a bumpy dirt road. It's slow, weak, and easy to lose. That's why your movements are clumsy. But when you practice correctly, meaning you fix mistakes and repeat perfectly, a special cell in the brain called an oligodendrocyte starts wrapping a layer of white fat around that nerve fiber. This fat is myelin. Myelin acts like plastic insulation around an electrical wire. It prevents the signal from leaking, and most importantly, it increases signal speed by 100 times. When you see a pianist's fingers flying over the keys at impossible speeds, you aren't looking at talent. You are looking at super thick, myelin-wrapped nerve fibers. They have turned a bumpy dirt road into a superhighway. But remember the warning from Act 1. Myelin doesn't distinguish between good and bad. If you practice with poor technique, myelin will wrap around that wrong wire. You will build a superhighway leading straight off a cliff. That is why breaking a bad habit is 10 times harder than learning a new one. But neural speed is only half the story. The biggest difference between a grandmaster and an amateur chess player isn't that they calculate faster, it's that they see things differently. In a classic experiment, researchers showed a grandmaster a chess game in progress for 5 seconds and then asked them to recall the position of the pieces. The grandmasters recalled it almost perfectly. Amateurs could not. But here's the twist. When researchers placed the pieces on the board randomly, breaking the rules of chess, the grandmaster's memory collapsed. They remembered just as poorly as the average person. This proves grandmasters don't have superhuman memory. They have superior mental representations. They don't see individual isolated pieces, like here is a knight, there is a pawn. They see chunks, lines of force, and tactical patterns. They see the structure of the board. Similarly, London taxi drivers have to pass the world's toughest test called the knowledge. They have to memorize 25,000 streets. Brain scans show that their hippocampus, the area responsible for spatial navigation, is physically larger than that of a normal person. They literally change the structure of their brains through practice. So, the goal of deliberate practice isn't just to do it faster. The goal is to build detailed, sharper mental maps in your brain
that let you see what others cannot. So how can you, a normal person without a private coach, build these maps yourself? You need a protocol.
The theory is done. Now it's time for action. In Ericsson's research, he always emphasizes the critical role of a skilled teacher to provide feedback. But let's be real, not all of us have the money or the time to hire a private coach. So what if you have to go it alone? How do you apply deliberate practice when you are by yourself? Here is your Autodidact Protocol. It consists of 4 phases. Phase 1, deconstruction and the sweet spot. Never set a vague goal like, I want to get good at English, or I want to play the guitar well. That is a recipe for failure. You cannot practice being good. You can only practice the tiny components that make up good. Learn from Benjamin Franklin. When he wanted to improve his writing, he didn't just write more. He took excellent articles from the Spectator magazine, read them, made notes on the main points, put the original away, and then tried to rewrite the article in his own words. Finally, he compared his version with the original to find the differences. He deconstructed the skill of writing into vocabulary, sentence structure, and rhythm. You must break your skill down until you find a task that sits in the 4% zone. That means it is only about 4% harder than your current ability. If it's too easy, you get bored, mindless repetition. If it's too hard, you get discouraged, panic zone. Growth happens in that narrow 4% gap. Phase 2, immediate feedback loops. This is the hardest part of self-study. How do you know you are wrong if there is no one there to tell you? You have to build a virtual coach. If you are learning public speaking, don't just talk to the mirror. Record audio or video of yourself. Then, watch it back as a harsh critic. Compare it to a video of a TED speaker you admire. The gap between you and them is your practice roadmap. If you are a coder, look at expert code on GitHub. Try to write it yourself and compare. The rule is, never perform an action without a mechanism to evaluate the result immediately. Phase 3, embrace the grind. Let's be clear, hard work and hard practice are 2 different things. You can work hard for 10 hours a day in a state of comfort, but deliberate practice requires a level of mental focus so intense it is painful. Ericsson discovered that even the world's top violinists could only sustain this state for a maximum of 4 hours a day, and they usually broke it down into 60 to 90-minute sessions. If you finish a practice session and your mind feels relaxed and happy, I'm sorry, but you didn't practice deep enough. Mental fatigue is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that your brain is building muscle. Phase 4, the resimulation strategy. When an amateur makes a mistake, they say, "Oops, bad luck," and move on. When a professional makes a mistake, they stop immediately. They don't ignore it. They isolate that specific error, analyze why it happened, fix it, and then perform the action again correctly. And they do it again and again. Never end a session on a mistake. Always end on a correct attempt. You need to tell your brain, this is the right path. Wrap myelin around this wire, not the other one.
Before we finish, I want to tell you the story of Laszlo Polgar. Laszlo was a Hungarian psychologist. In the 1960s, he made a shocking claim: geniuses are made, not born. To prove it, he decided to turn his unborn children into chess prodigies, a game that was considered the domain of innate intellect. He and his wife taught their 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith, to play chess using deliberate practice from a very young age. The result? All 3 became world-class players. Judith Polgar became the greatest female chess player in history, even defeating world champion Garry Kasparov. What does this story teach us? It teaches us that talent is often just an excuse. It is easy to look at an elite performer and say, "Oh, they have good genes. I don't have that gift." That sentence sounds humble, but it is actually lazy. It allows you to give up. It allows you to accept mediocrity without guilt. The truth is much more brutal. You don't lack talent. You lack the willingness to endure discomfort. You lack the patience to fix tiny mistakes for thousands of hours. Deliberate practice is the democratization of excellence. It is fair, but it is ruthless. It doesn't care who you are, it only cares how you practice. So, here is my 7-day challenge for you. Don't try to change your whole life at once. Pick one small skill that you have been stuck at okay with for years. Maybe it's typing, cooking, or a soft skill at work. Dedicate 30 minutes a day for the next week. Turn off your phone. Apply the 4-step protocol. Deconstruct it, find the weakest point, fix it, and get immediate feedback. Don't just do it, dissect it. If you do this, you will realize that the biggest barrier isn't biology. The biggest barrier is the flawed map in your head about how the world works. I'm Hostname, and this is Psych Blueprint. If this video gave you value, hit like and subscribe. We publish new blueprints for the mind every week. Stop repeating and start truly practicing. See you in the next video.